Hi there, welcome back to Energetically You. My name is Megan Swan, and I'm the creator of the Sustainable Integrated Wellness Approach. I am a wellness and mindset coach specializing in all things healthy habits, abundant mindset, and optimal wellness. I work with powerhouse women that are looking to optimize their peak performance through tweaking their mindfulness practices, nutrition, and overall intuition, tuning into their energy, biorhythms, and honoring their sleep cycle. Today, I have the honor of chatting with Eric Winters, who is a self-leadership coach. I can't wait to ask him about that title. He has over 20 years of experience in international corporate life, 2 master's degrees in human behavior change, and over 12 years of helping leaders and their teams become their best selves to meet workplace challenges effectively. He's here to tell us about his work and his book, which is called Swipe Right on Your Best Self, Simple Steps to a Bolder Life with Fewer Regrets. So let's dive in. Welcome back to Energetically You. I'm here this evening with, well, it's this morning for him, Eric Winters. He's in Sydney. And he is here to tell us all about his work as a self-leadership coach. I wanted you to break down that title, first of all, before we get into your wealth of experience and knowledge.
Megan, hello. It's a pleasure to be here talking to you today. So yes, the title self-leadership coach. So what I do is I go into organizations and I run trainings to help people, busy professionals generally, senior leaders. I help them to manage their minds, to manage their own minds, first of all, so that they can meet life's inevitable challenges more effectively. Because before we can lead others successfully, we've really got to take care of ourselves. We need to manage our own focus, our energy, our ability to choose to do the right thing, even when it's the harder thing. So the bulk of my work is all around developing our own emotionally intelligent mindsets to enable us to do that. And there are skills that we can all learn to get better at doing what's hard but meaningful. And what I hear again and again is people, they traipse into these workshops. Sometimes they've been sent and they'll say, I've got to attend this workshop. And the first thing I do is let them know that this is really a set of skills for outside of work, because developing our ability to make good decisions, to choose to meet challenges well, it applies not just to professional life, but to our relationships with those we love, with the foods we choose to put in our mouths, choosing to do what's right and nourishing rather than what's expedient and fun. And yeah, just how we spend our time, so that they perk up quite quickly when they realize that these set of skills, developing emotional intelligence, it's not just for work, it's for life. And yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Love that you use the word nourish. And I'm curious if you can share with us some of the things that you start with. I mean, for me, meditation and journaling have been really key tools to help me have more, well, the meditation specifically, just that pause before I react to a situation, which has been very impactful in my life in many ways across the board. Like you say, it applies to everything. Are there other sort of pinpoints that you always start with, a baseline?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of meditation too, Megan. I think it might be one of the top 3 things I've discovered in my life that has really elevated the quality of my living. The ability to notice and be present and choose. So there are a number of things we do with people. But while we're on the topic of simple strategies, not that mindfulness is that simple, it takes us a certain amount of practice. But one of the things I teach people, I mean, it's an ordinary thing, but it's to really cultivate the habit of gratitude in our lives, because we are bombarded by messages from our culture that we are inadequate, that we don't have enough, and that we are not enough, that we're taught to experience lack by the media, that you're simply insufficient, where none of us are attractive enough or popular enough or successful enough or slim enough. You can add your criteria where we're not enough. And what we practice, we get better at. And we've all spent our lives practicing feeling a sense of inadequacy. And this just shifts us into a depleted mindset where truly being present and choosing what we're going to do is much, much harder if we're experiencing a continual sense of inadequacy and threat. And one of the things that we can do, there's a lot of things we can do to bolster ourselves, but one of them is to cultivate the practice of gratitude. And I used to practice it in very traditional ways, to savor my experience as I walk around, to taste my coffee, to enjoy my food, to appreciate things in my life. But I learned a wonderful new exercise this year that I'd like to share with you.
Please.
And it is really dialed up for me, my experience of gratitude. And it's this, and it turns out it's a very old Stoic practice. This comes from 2,000 years ago. And the idea is that everything we do in our life, at some point, we will do it for the last time. Everything. It could be at a meal at a restaurant before it closes. You might have a conversation with someone and maybe they'll leave the country or they'll move to a different city. You might not see them again. It could be anything. All of us have used telephones. Do you remember dial telephones where you'd put your finger in the phone and you'd rotate the dial?
My grandparents did, yes. I love that.
Yeah. I use them at times, but then at some point I stopped and I'll never do it again. And of course, at some point our lives come to an end and we'll have done everything for the last time. So the practice is this, and I call it the ultimate gratitude exercise. It's when we, at sometimes during the day, to imagine we're doing whatever we're doing for the last time, no matter how mundane. So imagine I'm holding a coffee here. Your listeners can't see that. I'm holding my coffee. From time to time, I imagine this is my last coffee. And for some reason, perhaps I'm on a mission to Mars. And incredibly, there are people going to Mars in the next few years who will never taste coffee again, ever. They will never have a croissant again. They will never have fish and chips again. There's all sorts of things, experiences, that people they won't see. They won't swim in the ocean again, all sorts of things. So I pause and imagine this was my last coffee. And how much attention, Megan, would you give? I don't know if you're a coffee drinker. This may not fit well, but you're a tea drinker.
It's a kind of a love-hate relationship, but I love it, yes.
Oh, you would be so present if it was the last. The odor, the feel of it in your hand, the sensation on your tongue. If you're having your last piece of chocolate, Megan, your very last piece of chocolate. Some virus was wiping out cocoa beans. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are, but if you were to truly eat a piece of chocolate as though it was the last, then it just propels you into an extremely mindful, present, focused, savoring state, a very profound savoring state. And I'll do this several times a day. I'll just walk past a tree. Imagine that was the last tree I was ever going to see. Wow, look at the leaves, the bark. Wow, the green. Now, I'm not spending hours doing this, Megan. We've got work to do. We've got beds to make, washing up to attend to. But 5 seconds, 10 seconds, that's all. It only takes a few moments. And it just creates a profound sense of appreciation and gratitude and awe. And by practicing that, we're building up a different set of neurology. And we are countering that relentless messaging that we're getting from the rest of the world saying that we're not enough. We can bolster that with gratitude.
Oh my goodness, that really hit me when you first, I knew you were going, but when you first mentioned it, and it immediately took me to my last year probably with my grandfather. So you have that when you're a family member is in a stage of life and you don't live in the same city, and you know every single time you're saying goodbye, it might be, or this might be the last conversation, eye to eye, all that. And in my experience, I was always so much more intentional, and I had some of the best years of our relationship were, of course, when I was in that mode. But yeah, on the day to day, and I think people underestimate how much it is a practice. I mean, it's kind of tedious to say, but it's not a shift that happens overnight or easily in the mind, because it's just, like in my, decades, you have ingrained this in your brain, whatever your default, which, as you mentioned, for most people, it's some sense of lack. And so you need to keep with it. And also, people underestimate how seconds or a couple minutes a day really can have a compound effect of shifting things over time. It gets
Absolutely.
easier, but you need to keep at it.
You do. And we have been trained also to be distractible. So we're forever thinking, oh, what's the next thing I need to do? I need to get that, I need to do that. And we really need to reclaim ownership of our attention and decide where we're going to place it. And one of the places we need to place it is on things that we appreciate. Now, actually, I'm just going to savor this just for a moment. And it is just for a moment, but it's so nourishing when we do that. And as you say, there are times when we know we're doing something for the last time. An elderly relative is not well, and you will really bring yourself into the present moment. But we shouldn't wait until the people we care for are sick. We can be with them in that appreciative, present, purposeful way right now.
Yeah, I find this is a practice always, but even more now in the pandemic. I've been homeschooling or had, my kids and I have been in the house for a year, since March of last year. And wow. They just finished school today. Of course, the turning off of the iPad was finishing grade 1 and grade 3 for them. But the point I was thinking of making is how I answer them. I try and be as conscious. Obviously, I'm not always, the perfect mom by any means, but just taking that deep breath and pause to the mommy, instead of just answering in the mode, because I'm in my head. I'm not doing I'm not present at that when they're asking for my attention. And so instead of snapping taking the deep breath and, yes, my love, what is it? And because that becomes so ingrained to them, the type of energy you're answering with. And I think, I'm sure it applies on the corporate level as well, but that's more my present day experience lately.
Well, that capacity to pause is a superpower. I don't think we should underestimate it. Pausing before doing pretty much anything just interrupts that automaticity. It responds acting out of a sense of perhaps a potential annoyance or being short or brief with people. So, yeah, I like it very much. The power of the pause.
Yes. Is there something that you can point to that you feel that in your leadership courses or workshops is like a common point of resistance, besides the fact that they don't necessarily want to be there, that they've been sent? Is there like one or two things that they just don't want to let go of?
Well, I make it very open because I'm not trying to tell people what they should be doing. I'm simply saying, look, here's a set of strategies and techniques. Then they're not all going to work for you. Take your pick. You decide. You're all best placed to choose what's effective and what's not. So there's generally a great deal of appetite. There are those who find it so hard to be present. It's irritating if there's any kind of an exercise that requires reflection and pausing. Their minds are so jumpy, they're so stressed, they've got so much in their inbox. It's very hard for them to bring their attention into the present. But for those people, sometimes we'll do these exercises outside. So we'll take them out of the familiar office environment, which is reminding them of everything they've still got to do. And if we can just be somewhere else. So I found running retreats in other locations really helpful for just unhooking from those cues, all of those cues that keep us shackled to our to-do lists.
And are there rules around technology or anything like that? Or it's up to everybody to be present?
Well, funny you mentioned that. So I run workshops, a lot of workshops for the Australian Public Service, Department of Defence, Health, Infrastructure. And they take in a raft of new graduates every year, bright, skilled young things. And at the start of workshops, and these are workshops about developing focus and attention. I say, all right, well, we're as part of developing our focus and attention, we're going to focus on this course. So could everyone put you off? I don't even tell them to put them in a basket or anything. I said, I just wanted you to turn your phones on mute, and I want you to put them upside down and somewhere where you cannot see the shape. I just do not want you to be able to see the shape. And this elicits a state of alarm in about 10% of them. It's absolutely extraordinary. And you'll hear all of these rationalizations crop up and say, I don't have a problem. You're saying I have a problem with, I know what you're saying. You're saying I have to keep looking at phone. I don't. It's just, and they'll think quickly, very useful. It's really useful because I can access information. I want to look things up. When you're talking about ideas, I like to look them up. I'm saying, yes, you're right. And thank you.
Learning curve.
But how they suffer. And it's actually, some of them can't. They are actually incapable, or let's say severely unwilling. Of course they can do it. Extremely unwilling to not continually touch and look at their phones. It's distressing. They are so tired. And they'll tell me, no, Eric, what you don't understand, Eric, is that we've grown up with them and our minds have adapted. They've adapted so that we are able to do two things at once. And I'll tell them, yes, you are. But what you're not able to do is one thing at once. What you're struggling to do is to deeply immerse yourself in one topic. And that's what we're practicing here. And there's a lot of grumbling, Megan. It's distressing. Now, the older people in the audience, sometimes I'll have graduates in the room and someone who's perhaps 40 or so. And the older people remember life pre-phones. They remember what it was like. And they will often speak up and say, no, actually, these phones, they are an irritant on our attention. They are a problem. And they'll admit, actually, I find it harder to focus now. Phones absolutely erode our ability to be present, to focus, and to do deep work. So that is what I am noticing. Have you noticed that yourself with the people you talk to?
So Distractions, yes. I see it myself, and that's more what concerns me. And then, of course, controlling devices for my kids for the same reason, because they're just so much more susceptible to what I already experienced, which is I have to consciously be present, or I have to consciously put it away. But I feel like I'm in a relatively good place because it's something I work on. I'm conscious of the benefits of deep work and doing things like protecting myself, if you will, creating these buffers. And it's a lot of what I work with clients as well. But I don't know, did you see the Netflix documentary, Social Dilemma?
I did. Well, very, very.
Not that it's an excuse, but it's definitely important to appreciate that these things are increasingly designed to hack our attention, for a better word.
They're powerful, and they are good at it. And I feel the urge too. I want to check my phone. I don't know what good news there may be in the inbox. There's a part of me that says, oh, maybe there'll be some interesting work. Maybe have a fun reply to read. Maybe someone else has read my book and they're giving me some feedback. It's they are Aladdin's caves of temptations and distractions. Aladdin's caves.
So tell me about your book title, because it's very curious. I want to hear the history.
Yes. So the book is called Swipe Right on Your Best Self. Simple Steps to a Bolder Life with Fewer Regrets. And I was giving a talk just 3 weeks ago, and there was a Dutch lady in the audience, and she said, Eric, swipe right. What on earth are you talking about here? What do you mean? And I explained that there's a lot of apps now, on the phone. And I think it all started with the dating app Tinder. Mm-hmm. I don't know that for sure, but I suspect it did. And in Tinder, you've got your profiles, a photograph of you and a bit of text about you. And if you're on Tinder, you sign up and you say, I'd like to meet people between the ages of X and Y. And you are presented one at a time with different people. And if you're interested, you put your finger on the photo and you swipe it to the right. You're choosing the kind of person you'd like to be with. And I've called my book Swipe Right on Your Best Self because every day we get to choose what kind of people we are going to show up as. It's actually a choice. We can sometimes be so distracted, we can forget that we do have a choice how we are going to be at work, what qualities we are going to embody. So my book is about how can we get better, and none of us can ever be perfect, but how can we get better at recognizing, one, what kind of people would we like to be, what we'd like to show up as, what matters to us, what's important, and two, how can we manage our minds and reduce our reactivity, reduce our impulsivity and avoidance, and instead dial up our intentionality and our capacity to do what's hard but personally meaningful, to choose to do the harder thing. So swipe right on your best self.
I like it. Can you quickly give us, do you speak to morning routines? Because when you use the word intentionality, to me, that's a big part of creating intentionality on a daily basis is waking up and having some space and deciding how even the first 30 minutes of your day, what kind of energy you're going to have and what are your non-negotiables for the day or your top 3 tasks or, how you want to show up, exactly what you're talking about.
Yes, I don't talk about morning routines, but what I do talk about is what we need to get in place prior. What are the prerequisites, even before we set up our little rituals? And I have a lovely little morning ritual as well, in which I reorient to what matters most. But even before then, we need to, one, take care of our physiology. So it's often overlooked by coaches and even therapists, we love to dive into the mind stuff, the psychology, the models, the limiting beliefs. We love to go there. But before we go there, we really need to attend to the fundamentals that are going to impact whether or not we can choose to do the harder thing. And the fundamentals, we all know what they are. And so they're a little bit boring, but they're so important. Everything else rests on them. And they're taking care of our sleep. We've absolutely got to take care of the quality as well as the quantity of our sleep. So Matthew Walker, the sleep researcher, describes it as our life support system. Sleep is our life support system. It's non-negotiable. So we've got to get those hours in. And now more so than ever, Megan, of course, because the amount of sleep we get, the quality of sleep determines how well our immune system functions.
Of course, yes.
And there's some extraordinary research showing that if you have a good night's sleep before you get a vaccine, you'll actually create a lot more of the antibodies. So we all need to be sleeping. We need to be sleeping well always, but now even more, it's more important than ever. So sleep matters. The next thing is movement. We are emboldened. Our blood chemistry changes when we move during the day. So we release something called myokines. And those who study blood chemistry, they call it the hope molecule. When we move during the day, we release myokines into the bloodstream. And as a result, we just become a little bit more positive. And I'm not talking about endorphin rush and running marathons or jogging at high speed. Simply going around the block or a little cycle, a little walk. The more the better. But movement literally creates hope. So we've got to sleep. We need to move. We must move. And the final thing, again, is we kind of know it, but we overlook how important it is how we nourish ourselves. And the quality of the food we eat will either give us a steady, stable, positive mood. So there is good mood food, or it will deplete us. And more we're realizing now that our mood is actually dependent on the health of our gut. And I'm not talking about the health of our actual innards, but it's the ecosystem. It's like we've got this inner barrier reef. Well, the coral reef has got all the fish around it and anemones and some sharks and octopus and seahorses, all sorts of things on a real reef in the sea. It turns out in our guts, it's like a zoo in there. There's an awful lot of life going on. And when we eat too much sugar or too many carbs, the quality of the life, it all shifts on the reef. It all shifts to being just predominantly dominated by one sort of bacteria and fungus and viruses. There's less diversity and our mood plummets. And when we eat less sugar and carbs, there's much more diversity, lots of different little bugs on the inside, and it elevates our mood. So extraordinarily, the quality of the food we eat doesn't just nourish us directly, but it's nourishing an ecosystem which impacts our mood. So we've got to attend to those things: sleep, movement, and food. Those are the first things that I ask people to attend to. And I know these things are important in your life, Megan.
Yes. I mean, I'm the opposite. Like, I tend to work with people on the mind stuff after exactly what you said. I mean, people come to me usually for advice on what they should be eating based on how they perceive my expertise. I talk a lot about doing detoxes as a wellness tool for that same thing. I feel like you need to peel back these layers before you can really get the kind of traction and energy that you want to, because you need sustainable energy to make these changes or be consistent with these practices.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I love that word, sustainable. energy. Getting non-sustainable energy is never been more affordable to get. I've never seen such big chocolate bars, Megan. I don't know what it's like where you are, but my goodness, in the supermarkets, for not very much, you can take a kilo or more of chocolate home with you. Wow.
Here in Mexico, the problem is Coca-Cola.
Oh,
they have 5-liter bottles of Coca-Cola here.
No. I can't imagine
people like having breakfast with a Coca-Cola.
My goodness. I have to imagine that in just a few years, we'll look back in horror that it used to be legal to buy fizzy sugar drinks in the shops. Can you believe that? They used to drink that.
I remember the doctor. There was a great New York Times article, and I can't remember who the quote is, but I think he was the first to determine, that basically sugar is the next nicotine in terms of regulation.
Yeah, good. Pleased to hear it. So after I've talked to people about those, I talk about getting fit for purpose. The sleep, the exercise, the nutrition. We've got to get fit for a purposeful life. First, we attend to that. Then I turn my attention to 3 mindsets that I think help us to orient to a more courageous lifestyle. And the first one we've mentioned is gratitude, but I call it defiant gratitude. I'm encouraging people to be grateful in spite of the advertising that's telling them that they're not enough. And also in spite of the fact, we don't like to talk about it, but we're not actually here forever. Okay. We've all got a certain number of years on the planet, and that can throw us into something of a panic if we reflect upon it. Our mortality is not something we like to think very much about. But if we're not grateful for the moments we have each day, if we turn away from recognizing just how precious they are, they're irreplaceable. Every minute we have is irreplaceable. If we turn away from the limitedness of our lives, our mortality, then we diminish a sense of urgency. We rob ourselves of a sense of urgency to live boldly right now. And we need to live boldly. If we're going to have our richest lives, we need to boldly ask for what we want, put in place barriers around our time and our energy. We need to speak up in meetings. We need to be heard. We need to ask for what we want in our relationships. We need to be bold enough to leave sometimes our relationships. Mm-hmm. So a meaningful, rich life that's authentic it asks us to be bold every day. And one of the 3 mindsets that supports that is a sense of defiant gratitude. I'm going to be grateful in spite of everything. I'm going to appreciate what I've got. I'm not saying I'm going to stick with what I've got. I'm not saying I'm not going to make efforts to improve my relationships or the quality of my life, but I'm going to appreciate what I do have at the same time as I purposefully reach for more for myself and for others. So defiant gratitude is the first mindset we'll talk about. And the next one is self-compassion. So this is one, you mentioned it, you asked earlier on, is there any resistance sometimes to anything you share with people? So yes, when I talk very carefully about self-compassion, because it can sound, in the corporate context, it can sound like indulgence, sitting back, taking it easy. Self-compassion, you say take it easy. We've got to drive ourselves. We've got to meet our 4th quarter targets, Eric. We've got to work all our hours. With self-compassion, that's going to undermine that. Whereas people like yourself and people who work in my field, we know that actually being kind to yourself, so self-compassion is, being kind to yourself actually empowers you. Kindness empowers us. And it's possible to be kind to yourself and and at the same time energetically reach for more. With focus and optimism and energy, we can work on projects, connect, be ambitious. We can be personally ambitious in our relationships and our professional lives, whilst at the same time being kind. It turns out being kind, it shunts us into an empowered state.
Definitely. I think it helps. I mean, when we're practicing embodying elevated emotions like gratitude, happiness, compassion, you are more efficient with your energy. So arguably it's, improving the bottom line in terms of the corporate mentality, but it's enabling you it's supporting your creativity as well. You're a better problem solver, all these things when you're in a positive state versus some sort of emotion based in fear or lack.
Absolutely. So we can either be in a state which is fueled by fear, in which we're trying to avoid the criticism of others, avoid not meeting our fourth quarter targets and getting shouted at by the boss. We can be in a state motivated by fear, or with self-compassion, we can choose to be in a state motivated by care and love. And when we do that, we are literally emboldened. We are emboldened. I very much like Christine Neff's definition of self-compassion. And she said, she reckons there are three components. And we're self-compassionate when we're kind to ourselves, when we recognize our common humanity, that the struggles you have, the worries you have, they're shared by everyone. You can't tell it from the outside, but absolutely everyone we see has an inner critic and they're worried about paying the bills or something else. Everyone's worried. We're all in the same boat. And her third characteristic of self-compassion, her third quality, is mindfulness. It's the ability to be with distress and not to exaggerate it, and also not to turn away from it, but to hold inner distress with kindness in balanced awareness. That's how she defines mindfulness, holding your inner experience in balanced awareness. And when we can bring those three things together, practice self-compassion, we are emboldened and energized to reach for more of what's meaningful in life.
I love that. And what's the third mindset?
Yes, and the third mindset is courageous authenticity. Courageous authenticity. So what I'm talking about here is the willingness to author our own lives, to take responsibility for our minutes and our hours and our days, to own them and to choose. Well, one is to find out what's important. To be authentic, we need to know what truly does matter to us. If we're going to author our life, we need to put in a little bit of work thinking about, okay, what would it look like? And courageous authenticity is the willingness to do what is hard while it's hard. So it's not waiting until I'm completely confident, not waiting until I have no fear, no doubt, no uncertainty. If we wait until we're completely confident, we will never do it. I think it was Seth Godin that said something along the lines of, if you wait until you're ready, it's too late. So we do not wait until we're ready. We need to develop the capacity to acknowledge that anything important to us in life is going to be hard. Anything. Yeah. And probably the more important it is, the more hard it will be, the more challenging. So we need to own that there is going to be a price to be paid in reaching for the relationships that we want, in applying for more senior work, perhaps, taking on new responsibilities. Everything in life that is really meaningful is going to come at a price. There's a price. And if we can be willing to pay the price, be willing to be courageously authentic, then we won't wait as long. We will take action.
I like that.
So that's the third mindset, courageous authenticity.
That's beautiful. So is the book new? When's the book out?
Well, the book was, it came out last year, which was just a terrible year. I wrote it before the pandemic hit. I was writing the last sentences as a pandemic erupted. So it was a really bad year to release a book. I'd imagined, as I was writing it, I'd visualized myself standing in front of audiences, talking about the content. Mm-hmm. And I'd had no idea I'd spend so much time on Zoom.
Presenting it.
Yes. So it is, it has been out for 7 or 8 months. So it was published late last year. And it's available on Amazon. There's a Kindle version as well. And if listeners are interested, they can download the first chapter. Actually, it's the first chapter and a half or so of the book from my website at no charge. So you can taste it, see if it's the sort of thing. And in fact, I'm willing to say, if you like the first page, you'll like the rest. So you don't have to read the whole download. You could read one page, and it all begins in the acknowledgements. I don't wait until the introduction. I begin the book in the acknowledgements.
Wonderful. We'll share all those links in the show notes. Is there anything else you want to leave us with? Parting thoughts?
Well, I might leave you with a quote from Winston Churchill. Let's see if I've got it here. Yeah. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. So I turn to those words from time to time. Courage isn't always wrestling with hijackers on a plane. You know, courage is small acts of continuing each day, continuing to love our kids when they're being difficult, continuing to focus on a project when we're tired and when we'd rather do something else. It's continuing to practice what matters most. So I think Winston had it right. It's the courage to continue that counts.
And I love that within your frame of authenticity.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Eric, for being here with us this evening for me, this morning for you. I hope you have a wonderful day there in Sydney, and we will be in touch.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for having me, Megan. It's been a pleasure.